Hello and welcome to What the F*** Just Happened Today, your essential guide to the daily shock and awe in national politics. I'm Joe Amditis. Let's get to it. It's Monday, October 24th, 2022. Welcome to day 643. 4th and 8th graders in most states across almost all demographic groups fell behind in reading and had the largest ever decline in math in the first national assessment of educational progress since the pandemic began. The average math score for 4th graders was 5 points lower than it was in 2019 and 8 points below the 2019 mark for the 8th grade. The share of 8th grade math students deemed proficient dropped from 34 to 26%, and 38% of 8th graders failed to grasp basic math concepts. No state or large urban district showed improvements in math. Reading scores, meanwhile, declined in more than half the states, dropping to 1992 levels. Education Secretary Miguel Cardona described the scores in both subjects as appalling and unacceptable, adding, quote, "Let me be very clear. These results are not acceptable," end quote. Meanwhile, a federal appeals court temporarily blocked Biden's student loan forgiveness program. The 8th Circuit Court of Appeals issued the stay while it considers a motion from 6 Republican-led states to block the program completely. Last week, Supreme Court Justice Amy Coney Barrett rejected a similar effort from a Wisconsin taxpayer group. Nearly 22 million people, more than half of qualifying borrowers, have already signed up since the application portal went live. Moving on, Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas temporarily blocked Lindsey Graham from having to testify before a Georgia grand jury, which is investigating efforts to overturn Trump's loss in the 2020 election. The order, which is an administrative stay, comes after the 11th U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals unanimously turned down Graham's request to block the subpoena and affirmed the lower court's decision that he must testify. Graham claims he's protected by the Constitution's speech or debate clause, which shields legislators from certain law enforcement actions for conduct connected to their legislative duties. Graham's petition went to Thomas because he is the justice designated to hear emergency requests from the 11th Circuit. Democrats, meanwhile, have demanded that Thomas recuse himself from any case related to the 2020 election because his wife had encouraged Trump White House officials and state legislators to overturn Biden's victories in swing states. Meanwhile, the January 6th committee formally subpoenaed Trump, demanding his testimony before the panel dissolves at the end of the year. The subpoena requires Trump to turn over documents by November 4th and to appear for one or several days of deposition under oath beginning on November 14th. Nancy Pelosi, meanwhile, suggested that Trump isn't, quote, man enough to show up, end quote, to testify, adding, quote, "I don't think his lawyers will want him to show up because he has to testify under oath," end quote. In a letter accompanying the subpoena, the committee wrote about its overwhelming evidence showing Trump personally orchestrated the effort to overturn his defeat in the 2020 election, including by using false allegations of widespread voter fraud, attempting to corrupt the Justice Department, and pressuring state officials, members of Congress, and Mike Pence to change the results. Quote, "In short, you were at the center of the first and only effort by any U.S. president to overturn an election and obstruct the peaceful transition of power, ultimately culminating in a bloody attack on our own Capitol and on the Congress itself," end quote. It is the second time in modern U.S. history that a president has been issued a congressional subpoena. And finally, classified documents recovered by the FBI from Trump's Mar-a-Lago home in Florida included U.S. secrets about Iran and China. At least one of the documents described Iran's missile program, and other documents reportedly described highly sensitive intelligence work aimed at China. The documents about Iran and China are considered among the most sensitive the FBI has recovered to date. And in the polls, NBC News says 80% of Americans believe that their opposing political party poses a threat that, if not stopped, will destroy America. Nevertheless, nearly 2/3 of Americans would still vote along party lines even if their candidate had a moral failing that wasn't consistent with their own values. That's all for now. You can find the links and sources for all of these stories on the main website. And as always, visit whatthefjusthappenedtoday.com for the latest news and headlines. Until next time, I'm Joe Amditis.